Let's talk about Moon Knight. I am a big fan of Moon Knight from the comics. When the show was announced, didn't know who he was. I'm not gonna lie to you. Not a clue. But it was announced. I read a few of his runs, fell in love, read a few more. This Mark Spector guy here has become one of my favorite superheroes. He is awesome. After reading a few of his runs, I was pretty excited to see the Disney Plus show. And after seeing the trailer, I was also pretty excited to see the Disney Plus show. Now, I'm going to be serious here. I don't think any of the Marvel Disney Plus shows are outright bad. I think they are on a scale from good to mediocre. And I was so excited for Moon Knight, and I was so ready for something unique, something different, something action packed and cool and crazy and mind bending. And, it's not mediocre, it's a little bit above that, I think, but the show should work. The show has so much in it that should work, but there are these small issues that just get caught in the gears and make it frustrating. So today, I'm going to be reworking the show, restructuring it, changing it so that it goes from what it is to what I think at least would be something better. I have a few rules though. I gotta keep the good stuff. This makes sense. I'd keep the good stuff even if it weren't a rule. Also, I gotta keep the general skeleton of the story. I can change details within the story, but no matter what, the main beats are: man finds out he is Moon Knight secretly without knowing. He discovers his dissociative identity disorder. He has to stop a cult leader attempting to resurrect a god that will kill many people. My final rule, and possibly most important, I have to make Moon Knight the character more similar to his comic book appearance. Because frankly, Moon Knight in the show is too starkly different from Moon Knight in the comics, I think, to really be. I don't know. It's hard for me to express my feelings on this. I think the show does a good general, skim the surface of Moon Knight, but I want a character that really has the depth of the comic book character, you know? I want Mark Spector with Jake Lockley and Stephen Grant and all of their interesting facets and depth. That is a rule. First, let's just real quick run through some of the stuff that we're going to keep because it works. It's good. Ethan Hawke is an amazing actor. Perfect villain casting. Don't know how he wasn't cast earlier in something else. He just takes control of the screen. I'm glued to him. He just has such a good performance. We're keeping him. And that being said, we're keeping all the actors, for the main cast. They all did an incredible job. We're keeping Oscar Isaac. He is spectacular. He showed he can truly do, a character like Moon Knight, even if Moon Knight was written a little bit differently. There's a lot of potential there. Khonshu is portrayed perfectly. Even the writing, every single thing, the mannerisms, the writing, just how he borders on every single comic book iteration of the character. He is absolutely perfect. Khonshu is staying exactly how he is. No changes. A++ for Khonshu. And similarly, Layla is also staying exactly the same. I love Layla in this show. She is fantastic. Marlene in the comics, who she is based off of, is sort of a character. She's more there to represent Mark's doomed relationship. Mark is a difficult person to be around and be in a relationship with. He is a disaster, pretty much. He doesn't have himself together. He isn't taking care of himself. And because of that, he lets himself and his personal relationships fall through. And Layla is so good. She has the perfect, pissed off energy at Mark and the compassion towards Steven. I don't think that she and Steven should be like kissy kissy dating, sort of. It's an adaptation of a story where Jake Lockley has a child with Marlene, and Mark Spector doesn't know about it. We're gonna avoid that. It wasn't too great in the comics. We're gonna avoid that, at least for now. If they really want to adapt it, we can do it later on. But other than that, Layla is outstanding. She has agency. She has drive. She is such a cool character. Khonshu and Layla both get A+++. And the final thing I want to keep, we can keep Britain as like Moon Knight's main setting. In the comics, Moon Knight operates around New York. New York has like a shit ton of superheroes at this point. And you know what? Britain, we haven't seen that before. We can keep that. It's a change, but one that I'm fine with. And it also allows Steven to have a British accent more naturally, which I really like the idea that each of the different alters have a different accent. It's just something that allows the audience to have a bit better of an understanding of who's talking right now. And I think that's very important visually and audially for the audience. Soundly. Is there a word for that? So with that, those are the things that we are keeping. Those are hard sets staying the same because they are already working. But now let's get into some changes. I'm going to give a basic overview of the plot for my story for this telling of Moon Knight, and then I'm going to go and break down a few of the major changes that I want to see, some that are more in depth and that might not come up in a major plot like summary like this, or maybe major changes in the plot summary that, need to be discussed. So let's go through the plot of my reimagining of the Moon Knight show. We start out in the first episode by seeing a mental hospital where a therapist is currently having an interview with one of her patients, number 87. He's recently taking up a great interest in Egyptian mythology, specifically Ra, the sun god. As they discuss what's happening, how he's feeling, he stops. He gets up. He says he is done. That now he is the Sun King. We hear a scream as fire engulfs the building and it cuts to black. We get the whole Marvel logo thing, And then we see Stephen Grant waking up in his kind of really messy apartment. He checks his ankle lock, he checks his door locks, the tape, the sand, everything, nothing. A little later into the day, Steven's getting ready. He's putting on a nice shirt, a nice tie. He's putting on a suit jacket. He's looking suave, fancy. Hair slicked back. Proper. Cufflinks, everything. The works. He gets into a black SUV driven by a guy with a very distinct mustache. We'll get back to that. Steven is going to a gala, an event at a museum that he has helped fund. See, Stephen Grant is a wealthy man. In this gala, we'll learn from a few conversations, a few different things, that he has a lot of money. But he's a good guy. He has a strange, unnatural calling to Egyptian mythology, something that he's just felt attracted to since he was young. He doesn't know how to explain it, but it's there, it's true. So, he's donated a large portion of his money to help fund archaeological digs to help uncover new artifacts and piece together the history of ancient Egyptian civilization even better. And this gala is being held as a celebration. A dig that he helped fund has just unearthed new statues and ceremonial pots, just artifacts relating to the god of the moon, Khonshu. Ooh. We also learn in this party that Stephen Grant is a very hard man to get a hold of. Anytime he's asked for an interview, he agrees, but he almost never shows up. He almost never appears in person. He almost never calls on the phone at the right time. Publicly, Steven has said that he has sleep troubles and memory loss issues. He's been to multiple doctors and tried to figure out what's going on. But no one knows. So, like with his Egyptian obsession, Steven donates a huge portion of his wealth to help find cures for dementia, Alzheimer's, other similar memory loss diseases. He wants to help those in need with his money. He's a wealthy man, but he wants to do what's right. But we see Steven say his thank yous, say his goodbyes, and leave. He goes to sleep. He awakens in the Alps. This scene plays out basically the same as it did in the show, except Harrow is Sun King. Sun King walks through the town and calls out to the people. You have a choice. Follow me, worship Ra, or die where you stand. People follow him. People believe in him. You know, he can have a better speech than me just saying, die where you stand. You get the point. And he kills all the people that don't come with him. But, for all intents and purposes, this scene is majority the same as the show. In fact, these first 2 episodes are probably going to be the most held together and intact. We see Steven confused about all this. He wakes up. He finds out it's days later. But he chalks it up to his memory loss problems and his sleep troubles. He gets ready. He goes out. And he has to go to another event, another gala. A new archaeological dig is off today, and the museum is hosting a party to celebrate them on the night before they leave. Oh well. Steven goes. He attends. This is where we get that scene in the first episode between Steven and Harrow. They meet, they talk. Sun King talks to Steven about how Ra is a mighty god. One that is just, one that is right for humanity. He wants to unleash Ra because, well, Ra helps people, can do the right thing, is the light that people need right about now. Steven is concerned, thinks he's a little bit loony, but, goes along. They have a talk. Later on at the party, everyone's left. Steven's just there with the few people at the cleaning crew, helping to pack up from the party. He wants to help. He hears something deep within the museum. The Jekyll scene plays out again. If we can, I'd like to see Moon Knight fight the actual Jekyll a bit more. It'd be nice. But this scene plays out basically the same. Episode 1 is almost identical, few minor changes. Episode 2, also mostly the same. Steven wakes up, he goes, he investigates the locker. We find out a few more things about who Mark Spector is, but we also find that there's another guy, Jake Lockley. Jake Lockley and Mark argue about who let Steven out, why is he there, what's going on. And this is going to be really important and really fun. Jake is going to give a bit of comedy for Steven to bounce off of. They're going to have a whole new relationship that we can introduce. Khonshu shows up, does his whole thing, and then Steven meets Lila. They talk. Lila has the whole disagreement with Mark about wanting a divorce. It's hard. But Steven manages to convince Lila that he is Steven. He doesn't know who Mark is. He's got all these voices in his head. Steven, Mark, Khonshu, Jake. He doesn't know what's going on. Before the police show up. See, there were damages done to that museum last night. And damages that Steven helped fund. And the bathroom also was destroyed. So they take him in. But they go to the Sun King's compound. We meet a few characters there. We can maybe even introduce characters like the Truth, who was an ally of the Sun King in the comics. But we meet a few new characters there, a few people that are a part of Sun King's cult. The whole point of this is to show that they are praising Ra. They are worshiping him as a god. And Sun King uses this as an opportunity to prove to himself that Steven Grant has DID. This is what happens. He understands. He talks with Steven. He wants the scarab. That's it. It points to Ra's tomb. He just needs to resurrect Ra so that Ra may guide everyone into the light. And well, he's gonna kill anyone that stands in his way and those who don't worship Ra. See, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this hasn't been explained, but how it's gonna work is gods get their power from their worship, by people that recognize them and know them. With enough people worshiping Ra, he would be an unstoppable force that not even the mightiest Avengers could stop. In recent years, so many new gods are popping up because, well, with Thor and Loki, people are starting to be like, well, the Norse gods are real. What about the Greek gods, the Egyptian gods? And this can explain why we are starting to see more god characters in the MCU. With people starting to believe in them again, they're gaining more power, more responsibility, more presence. And Sun King wants Ra to have all the power, all the presence, to guide humanity into the light. So Steven and Lila get locked up. Steven has a conversation between him, Jake, and Mark. They discuss Jake takes over the body for the fight with this Jekyll. Whereas Mark fought the Jekyll in a very controlled and orderly, militaristic way, Jake is going to be a bit more of a loose cannon. A bit more of that classic Moon Knight fighting we see in the comics. He's going to get punched around, but he's going to, redirect the punches. We are not having Mr. Knight in this show at all. I'm very firm on that. Eventually, Jake and Mark together will defeat the Jekyll. Steven is a pacifist. He doesn't want to fight. But ultimately, they lose the scarab, and they have to go to Egypt. That is episode 2 done. Like I said, these first 2 episodes are probably the most similar. In episode 3, we see Lila making her fake passport, and we see more of Lila's perspective. I want to see Lila working her way through Egypt, finding Jake or Mark or someone in the middle of interrogating one of Sun King's men, as Sun King starts to make his way to Ra's tomb. From this, Mark has found out that there was another way that Sun King was trying to find Ra's tomb, an old sarcophagus, but he gave up on that when he discovered the beetle, because the scarab could lead him right there. We see Lila's perspective again as she goes through the black market, gathering information, finding out about Anton, the owner of the sarcophagus. They talk to Anton, they inspect it, and they find a star map in there. However, Steven's a little wary about working with Jake and Mark. They're both killers. He's a little on edge. He's not sure what's going on particularly. He's left in the dark a lot. But Jake manages to talk to Steven and console him. I want Jake to be a very kindly character, whereas Mark is more shut off, militaristic, just do this, kill that. I want Jake to be someone that's rough around the edges, but he cares. He might appear tough, he might appear gruff, but he does care. He wants you to be okay. He wants you to be safe. So the 3 of them manage to notice that it's a star map before Sun King shows up. He's caught wind that Moon Knight is on his way to find out where Ra's tomb is. Sun King destroys the sarcophagus just like in the show, but instead of purple magic, it's going to be fire. Sun King's got fire powers. It's cool. We're going to have a very similar fight scene to the one that happened in the show, except Jake just summons the suit. Moon Knight doesn't have powers. I draw the line at powers for Moon Knight. Traditionally, he doesn't have any superpowers at all in the comics, aside from maybe some in a couple of runs, but they're not common at all. So our Moon Knight, no powers. Got it? I want him to be stabbed by these giant, wooden spears that they're using, and in this fight to ensue And I want him to go all out. This is our fight scene to get comic book Moon Knight. Sun King is left. All that Moon Knight has to defeat is Anton so that Anton doesn't hurt Lila. So, what's he gonna do? He's getting attacked by Anton's men, getting stabbed with spears. Well, he's got spears in him. He can just use himself as a weapon. This is comic book Moon Knight at its finest. He is a wild card with he's a loose cannon. He is an unpredictable fighter that no one knows how he's going to fight or what his next move is going to be. He just does. Moon Knight should always have a trick up his sleeve or a leg up on the competition, something to go all out. So, he's stabbed by a spear by a guy? Cool. He turns around and rams it back into him. He runs around like a porcupine of death. He snaps off the spears at some point, uses them like batons and clubs at the people, and he throws one at Anton that sticks into his shoulder, but he starts charging at Lila. So Moon Knight runs over, picks up Lila, and dodges her out of the way just in time, throwing a crescent dart that hits Anton in the back. Damn, those cost a lot of money. He'll just think that to himself, you know? This is going to be the end of our episode 3. Pretty good episode. We see a lot more action in this one, I think. On to number 4. Here, we're going to start out by Lila helping stitch Mark up. You know, he might have been stabbed, but luckily they were in non-vital areas. The only major concern is one right at his shoulder. It might take a long while to heal, especially with the fighting that they're about to do. But this is going to show that Lila is really just compassionate. She cares about Mark, no matter how many disagreements that they might have. And we can have this scene to really push forward that Lila wants to be there for Mark. She never knew about Steven or Jake. And Mark didn't know how to tell her. He was ashamed and embarrassed, and he was worried. But he talks to Lila. They're in a doomed relationship, but he loves her still, and she loves him. They get stitched up, and they reconcile. They work together to help each other. I want a scene where the two of them are out searching for food, and we can get a cute little scene where, like, Steven's like, pork, I love pork. And Mark, in a reflection, is like, no, we're not eating pork. I'm Jewish. We're Jewish, Steven will say. No, I'm Jewish. I want a scene like that. I want more scenes to show that Mark Spector is a Jewish superhero. It's important. We'll get to it at the end. We see that, a few cute interactions, stuff to build us closer to the main characters. That night, we see that Sun King has found the tomb of Ra. And we see that with the discarded pieces of the map, Steven and Lila are able to stitch together a pretty good recreation of the star map. But those stars are really off, like 2,000 years off. So, Khonshu comes out, they do the cool like star scene. It looks awesome. They're summoned by the Ennead. And we get this scene again where the Ennead doesn't believe anything that Khonshu has to say. They think Sun King isn't real. Ra was sealed away for creating an old Sun King. In fact, we see him just standing there and giving a very similar speech. Now note, in this adaptation, Sun King was never an avatar of Khonshu, so we have to remove that element. However, Sun King still has a hatred for Khonshu because Khonshu is Ra's eternal rival. Pretty simple. The Ennead warns Khonshu that any other major discretion against them will cause him to be sealed away forever. So they're let go for the moment, and Spectre / Lockley / Grant and Lila are on the run. They have to find Ra's tomb and fast, because they know Sun King is already there. We see them show up, they go through, it's the Eye of Horus. This can also be pretty much the same. There's no relationship between Steven and Lila, but, Steven's real giddy and excited. He's archaeologically exploring a tomb. That's awesome. That's pretty cool. He goes through. Jake can have a few comments about how this place is creepy and stuff, but yeah, they get separated. Lila learns from Sun King what Mark did. Mark and Steven work together. They find the sarcophagus and they find Raz Ushepti. Is it called an Ushepti? I think it's called. I'm gonna look so stupid if that's wrong. Ushepti. I really hope. Steven and Jake are high-fiving. I want them to have like a father and son almost relationship. But they're just bros. They're happy and excited for each other. But then Layla walks in pissed. She managed to get away from Harrow. We can have a cool action scene where Layla manages to get away from Sun King. We can have a really cool action scene where Sun King tries to use his fire abilities, but Layla just says no and kicks the hell out of him. It would be so cool to see that happen. But she is furious. She demands to see Mark. And we get the reveal that yes, Mark's partner Bushman killed Lila's father. Sun King walks in. He shoots Mark and takes the Ushepti. He bashes Layla on the head, kidnaps her, and leaves. Mark is left there to die. That is our episode 4. In episode 5, we see Mark lying there, dying in a pool of water. It wasn't a fatal shot, but it was one that he's gonna die without medical attention. And unfortunately, he's stranded in the desert in the middle of an empty tomb. It's not looking good for him. He and Steven and Jake start to talk with each other. I don't want to have Moon Knight die in this show and go through the sands and the duat and like all that. And I especially don't want a retelling of the Lemire and Smallwood run of Moon Knight. That is my favorite comic book of all time, and I want that to be its whole own thing. So we're having Steven and Mark and just Jake talk. They talk in pools of water, and they are reflecting, much like how the altars are reflections, on their past life. I want to see more scenes of Mark's childhood, his bar mitzvah, his rabbi father talking to him. I want to see more scenes of that, because this whole episode is gonna be Mark revealing to Jake and Steven that he knows he's the original. They're gonna talk it out and come to an understanding and bond and get closer. I want to see scenes from Jake's life. Jake is probably the alter that will get the least amount of screen time, purely because he is the one that is typically associated with being the most violent. Even though that's not entirely true, it is what he's characterized as. So I want to see more scenes with Jake and his life. We can see him working at a cab industry in New York. It'd be a pretty cool reference to how Moon Knight normally operates in New York. But the final memory I want there to be is of the night Mark died. Mark Spector is shot, right in the same place, ironically, that Sun King shot him. He's dying. He's in an altar, a temple, one dedicated to Khonshu, the moon god. Is my light flickering? That's weird. Ignore that. He lays there on the ground, clutching a small gift given to him by his father before he left for the military. It's a necklace with the Star of David on it. It's blood splattered. He cries there silently. His God never came to help save him, to help save his people. He let millions suffer while his God never appeared. Mark is such an interesting character and is so important to be Jewish. We need to emphasize this in this scene especially. We see Mark dying there when suddenly Khonshu, an actual god, a real figure, arrives to him and offers him, become my fist, become the face of vengeance and right wrongs. And Mark accepts. After his life of misery, his abusive mother, the death of his brother that he feels guilty and responsible for, how his God let millions of other Jewish people suffer in his eyes while doing nothing, he accepts Khonshu's offer, and he becomes the Moon Knight. Jake and Steven console Mark. They comfort him. Before Khonshu arrives, standing there at Mark's feet, he tells Mark that he took him in. He made him his Moon Knight once. Sun King is going to kill millions without the Moon Knight to stop him. It's time to arise as the Moon Knight. Mark, stand up. Khonshu heals the bullet wound for him, much like he did all those years ago. He gets the suit. Jake gets the suit. Steven gets the suit. They are ready. They leave the tomb and search for the Sun King. This is the penultimate 5th episode. Real clear. Yeah. This is where Mark realizes he's too far away. There's no way he can make it to where Sun King is in time. By now, he could be at one of the Great Pyramids. He could be in the city of Egypt with Lila in danger. So he makes a call, and a certain man flies down an ultrasonic jet in the shape of a crescent moon. Frenchie steps out of the jet, the same guy that was unknowingly Steven's valet driver. He steps out of the jet. He goes, "Oh, Mark, I'm so glad that I could be here to help you." He says, "No time to explain, Frenchie. We need to go. We need to find the Sun King. He's got Lila." "Great. Get in." They speed off. Oh yeah. Steven has a little conversation with Mark. "Where did this come from?" "Yeah, we might have paid off for some of our own stuff from your money." Jake will tell him that. They get a little tussle. It's comedic. They find Sun King. That's him. That's the car. "Drop me, Frenchie." Moon Knight drops down on top of the car. Crashes right through it, like destroys that car by jumping onto it, and kills the 2 drivers inside. Finds no Lila, no Sun King. He gets out of the car. The other 2 that were there screech to a halt. They aren't in the city of Egypt. They aren't at the Great Pyramids. They aren't anywhere like that. They are at the Sun King's camp, with hundreds of cult members and followers and worshippers praising the Sun King, praising Ra. And Sun King frees Ra from the Ushepti. Again, hope that's what it's called. And he becomes his avatar truly. He gets powerful. He grows stronger. He burns off his shirt and becomes shirtless with the pants just like the comics. He is confident, and he holds Lila by the neck. Lila is cool, though, kicks him, manages to get away, and he sends some men off to go find and capture Lila. For now, he is to deal with the Moon Knight. Moon Knight's going all out. He's throwing crescent darts. He's getting Frenchie to drop down his personal, little moon glider that he has in the comics to fly it right into the Sun King himself. He's fighting, he's battling, but Sun King is strong as hell. He is a god-powered firebender from Avatar looking goddamn powerful ass man. He is getting his ass beaten, but he knows that he has to fight. But with each worshipper worshiping, he grows stronger until Moon Knight is on his knees. Sun King has pummeled him again and again and again until it's just him standing there, looking up at Sun King. We cut to Lila's perspective. She's being hunted by 3 men with guns, as well as another one on top of a truck. We watch as she sneaks around before, BAM! She attacks one of the men, gets his gun, shoots the other 2 men. We see her, BAM! Smash the windshield of the car, kill the driver, and she takes control of the vehicle. She drives right back to where Moon Knight was and smashes the car right into Sun King. She's hurt. The airbags went off. She's probably got some broken bones, but she is alive. Sun King gets up, though. He demands quiet. We see that his fiery eyes, his just aura diminishes a little bit. Without this active praise, he's a little bit weaker. Moon Knight notices this. He notices that Sun King currently only has one person worshipping Ra actively. Himself, as he talks himself up. So Moon Knight stands up, and Steven says, praise Khonshu. Jake Lockley says, praise Khonshu. Mark Spector says, praise Khonshu. Lila says, praise Khonshu. The 4 of them work together to praise Khonshu. Moon Knight stands up taller, stronger. He feels different. He feels a new energy. He doesn't have powers, but he is revitalized, and Sun King has no one to stop him. Moon Knight pummels the shit out of him. I mean, just classic comic Moon Knight, just everything at him at once. And like I said, always a wild card up his sleeve. We see Moon Knight smash Sun King into his knee before Lila delivers a blow to his face. You know, a little bit of payback and retribution for kidnapping her. And then Moon Knight throws Sun King up, and Frenchie, the mooncopter right into him, and he falls to the ground. He tries to call for people to start worshipping him, but Moon Knight stops him, and he kills him. That's Moon Knight. Ra is left without an avatar, and with his plan failed, and with it clear that he tried to start some sort of revolution and mass murder that only Khonshu could put away, the 7, big Egyptian gods, I just had the name on the tip of my tongue, I'm so annoyed, come and seal him away in Anushepti. Really hope that's the name as well. Khonshu is forgiven for having turned back the night sky, and that is it. That is our Moon Knight show. Post-credit scene. Raoul Bushman, just something with him. He is cool, maybe just a little thing teasing that he'll be in some future Moon Knight project. That's all I want. That's my Moon Knight show. Now, I want to go through a few of the major differences. Firstly, one of the most important ones, Mark Spector is Jewish. I want way more references to the fact that he is Jewish. That is an important part of the character, a hugely important part of the character, and to basically boil it down to an Easter egg is almost insulting. He needs to be Jewish. It is a huge, massive part of his character, and I basically lifted word for word what he said to a therapist, and I believe his current ongoing, love that ongoing by the way, read that comic, it's so good, but I quoted that basically word for word in the bit where I was talking about how the Jewish God abandoned him. That whole spiel. It's such an important characteristic about him. He is a walking contradiction. He is a man broken, praising and worshiping a god that is an Egyptian god while being a Jewish man with a rabbi father who taught him violence is wrong. He is a contradiction. And that is important to his character, and it has to remain. I am so firm on that. The second really major one is that Jake Lockley is in it from the start. He is equally as important of a character to Moon Knight as anyone else. He is an important alter. He matters. He should not have been reduced to a cameo and an Easter egg. That is disservice to the character of Moon Knight himself. It's important that we get more Jake Lockley, and also that he's just not a violent killer. Recently in media, he's been reduced to be a violent killer caricature. Is he more violent and brutal in the comics? Typically, yes. However, he's still a normal guy that cares and is compassionate. We need to see that side of Jake Lockley. A third huge change that you definitely saw is that Arthur Harrow is no more. He is just Sun King. Ethan Hawke plays a character called Sun King, the avatar of Ra. And it's a huge thing. And it annoys me that he was not already Ra in the show, because he is basically Sun King in the goddamn show. He is, in the comics, a cult leader that gathers members to judge them and to... He does the same thing, pretty much. And Moon Knight has to stop him. Why is it not just the Sun King? Literally so many articles to explain who Arthur Harrow was used photos of the Sun King, because Arthur Harrow is a mad scientist with face paralysis trying to find a cure for his own face paralysis that showed up in one issue in like the 80s or 90s, somewhere in there, in the Fist of Khonshu miniseries. So, no. Just make him Sun King. Another change that I'm still split on is making Lila not the Scarlet Scarab yet. I think she should become the Scarlet Scarab. I think she should be her. It's such a cool idea for the character. It's such a deep cut, too. And it's just, it gives Layla more oomph, more impact. But I also feel like Moon Knight is such an obscure character before this show came out that he needs to shine on his own, at least for this. Like I said, I'm split on it. I could easily go either way. If Scarlet Scarab is in it and is in the final episode, I am totally alright with that. I really like Lila in this show a lot. But you know, part of it also seeing just Lila being a badass and punching a guy powered by a fire-bending god, it's kind of a cool idea. But if Lila is the Scarlet Scarab, I think that's awesome. I want to see that. And no matter what, I would want to see Lila become the Scarlet Scarab at some point. She is just badass. I just feel that Moon Knight was a little obscure of a character before this and kind of deserved something to really put him on his own for a bit. Just for now. 3 last major changes. Firstly, Stephen Grant is rich. He is rich in the comics until very recently, which is a product of the show coming out and making him not rich. He is a wealthy man, and he uses that to help fund Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight works best when it's unclear if it's really happening or if Khonshu's an alter in his head. I think that works best if Steven funds Moon Knight for the other two. I know I pushed it a little bit with the still magic suit, but it can work. It can work. This uncertainty, this is just the main thing that drives Moon Knight. This unsureness of what you're reading is true. He is an unreliable narrator. All of his stories are unreliable. It's what makes it awesome. Secondly, of these last 3, I got rid of Mr. Knight. In the comics, Mr. Knight is a super important character. When Moon Knight has rejected Khonshu and is trying to be a more respectable person and put together hero, it is not something that should be introduced at the start, and it is absolutely not anything like in the show, pretty much. I changed it he could be introduced later. I think it'd be cool to have Mr. Knight in Moon Knight, but not yet. It is way too early and too soon to have a Mr. Knight. And the final thing that I wanted to do was try and pace these episodes better. I wanted to have each episode have a beginning, a middle, and end, a bit of an arc. I didn't really care if it was less than 6 episodes. It just worked out that it ended up being 6 episodes. I combined things together. I cut entire segments out, making Jake Lockley just a character surprisingly cut out a lot of time. Removing him dying was a big thing too. I think they were a little too quick with that, but I wanted to make the show feel a little tighter and each episode feel a little bit, better. When you're watching the show episode by episode, 1 and 2 are fantastic, and then like 4 or 3, it drags a little bit. It drags. All the MCU shows suffer from this, and I want to try and do a bit of a better job. We'll see how that goes. There are a bunch of minor differences as well that I just don't feel are... Oh, wait, no. There's one last difference, actually. I am so stupid. Frenchie. Frenchie is a huge Moon Knight character. He is Moon Knight's best friend / pilot / driver. Like, he's a great, awesome character who was reduced to a reference of the last name Duchamp. I guarantee it's because Frenchie in the comics is gay. I guarantee it. I wanted him to be in the show more. If you can have Frenchie just be Moon Knight's pilot, that's how he gets to Egypt, perfect. Add him in. I want more Frenchie. He is an important Moon Knight character, and I forgot that I added him because it would be so stupid to make a Moon Knight show that doesn't have Frenchie. It's like making a Moon Knight show that doesn't have Jake Lockley. Also, editor Henepp here with another change I made that I forgot that I made. Khonshu and Stephen Mark Jake Moon Knight are still together. They are still in a contract. They don't break up with the secret like Jake reveal at the end. They still work together. Moon Knight is still the avatar of Khonshu. This show takes a lot from the Lemire and Smallwood run of Moon Knight, which is crazy to me because that is like a really late game Moon Knight story where Moon Knight rejects Khonshu and gets rid of him, which is not Baby's first Moon Knight story. So I really don't want any references to that book in this show because I think that book should get its own whole season or movie or whatever they end up doing. It's a really incredible story. Seriously, if you haven't read it yet, I'm gonna make a video probably one day of recommended readings for Moon Knight, but go read it. It's incredible. But yeah. Overall, this is just my proposal for a Moon Knight show that is using the same skeleton, but it changes it, and in ways that I think more accurately reflect the character. Is it a one-to-one comic adaptation? Absolutely not. But I think it's pretty cool. I don't know. I'm not great at ending videos, I found. If you like this, I want to hear about it. If you have different ideas, I want to hear your ideas for how a Moon Knight show using this same structure could have worked. I love hearing ideas about how Moon Knight could work. Probably got something to do with how I love Moon Knight. But yeah, that's it. That is my Moon Knight show. Marvel, if you ever want to do a Elseworld story of Moon Knight, hit me up. That's about all. See ya.